Everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Tonight we are going to cook up our Easter dinner. We're going to have some lamb lollies. We're going to make a homemade green bean casserole, mashed potatoes, caramelized carrots and onions, and some sourdough yeast rolls. So let's start by getting our onions prepped for our green bean casserole. So we're going to take 2 onions here. We're going to take off this whole top layer, and then I'm just going to cut them in half, and then we'll do a thin, long slice on them because we're going to do like a little breading on them and fry them up for the crispy onions part of our green bean casserole. So when I say green bean casserole, everything is homemade from scratch. No like canned soup or anything like that. I thought I never liked green bean casserole, and then I was like, oh, I'm gonna just try and experiment, and I made everything from scratch. And green bean casserole, and then I was like, oh, I'm gonna just try and experiment, and I made everything from scratch. And it turned into one of my family's favorite dishes that I make at Thanksgiving or any like kind of holiday. So we're gonna have that up tonight because it is delish. So I've got 2 yellow onions or sweet onions, and we're going to slice those up. Here we go, because the crispy onions are where it is. Get these going. Okay, so we are going to make our seasoned little thing for our onions, our little batter. So we're going to use some flour, pepper, and garlic salt. Nothing, you don't need to go crazy with it. It doesn't need to be super seasoned. But we're going to put about a little 1.5 cups of flour in there. And then we're going to do about a teaspoon of ground black pepper. And we're going to do around a tablespoon of garlic salt. We're going to give it a good shake. And then I'm going to stir this up. And then this is what we're going to dredge our onions in, get them coated in the flour. Then we're going to add some breadcrumbs to it so our onions have a nice crispy crunch to them. So just mixing it up because we want our breading on our onions to have a nice flavor. And then we're going to crack 3 eggs in here and whip them up. We're going to add a little bit of cream to make it a nice little batter that the breading will cook to. So 3 eggs and about, I want to say, a tablespoon of cream. You don't need much. A little goes a long way. We're going to pop our yolks. I'm going to give this a good mix up. Okay. And then, so we've got our nice thick little eggy batter. Before we do that, we're going to start heating up our olive oil for our frying up our onion rings or our onion straws. So it's nice and hot and ready to go in. And I'm going to put a good amount in here because we're going to have several batches and I don't want to run out of oil or have to add more in the middle. So we're going to have a good amount. And we're going to warm this up. But while we do that, I'm going to first give all of these little onions. We're going to just stick them in this flour right here. We're going to spread it apart. We're going to kind of coat them all in a flour coating first. And we're like dredging the onion slices. And this is going to be the first step for getting our batter on it for our crispy onions for our green bean casserole. So we've got this one. Let's get our second batch in here. We've got this one. Let's get our second batch in here. And coat these nicely. Okay. And then we're going to shake them out. And this is going to allow the egg batter to really cling to the onions. And because if you try to dip your onion right into the egg batter, it's just going to slide right off. So we've got ours. They're all dredged up in this flour here. Here we go. You can see we're going to have a good amount of onion straws. We're going to have them both. They're going to go in our batter or in our green bean casserole as well as on top. So we added some panko breadcrumbs, but since I was running low, we're also going to add some plain. You need about a cup to a cup and a half. And then we're going to give this a good mix. You want to use seasoned because seasoned just tastes better. Here we go. And there's still a couple little onion pieces in here. No worries, no worries. Okay, now we are going to drop our, you're going to get messy on this part, but it's not, you're going to want to do it. You're just going to put a bunch in there, coat them around like this, and then you give them a good shake, and then we're going to put them in here, and we're going to do the same, kind of coat them on there. And they don't have to be completely coated. These aren't onion rings. These are more like crispy onion straws. So you want them to have a good coating on them, but they don't need to be completely coated like an onion ring. So get these, pop these over there, and toss these in the eggie. Again, this is a little bit messy, but it's going to be worth it for the crispy onion part of the green bean casserole. It's way better than, I guess, what is it, like those Frenches or something like that where you can buy and put them on. This is delicious. Okay, we're gonna let those sit and get these all coated. And so we'll get messy first, but you know what? You're not gonna be clean in the kitchen. It's like art. It's about the process. There we go. We've got these nice and coated. And then we're going to put them in here. Look, we used up pretty much all of our egg mixture. And we're going to toss these around. And then I find it sometimes easier to just pour everything over like this. And then we're just going to coat it. And then you see how they're all really battered up nicely. They're going to be so delicious. And we used in our flour mixture, we used garlic salt and black pepper, and then we used some panko breadcrumbs and some regular seasoned breadcrumbs. Okay, let me give my hands a quick wash, and then we're going to test to see how hot our oil is. Got them really coated, so let's give a good scrub. Okay, I'm grab a paper towel here. Okay, oh, let's do the water test. There we go. Almost there. I want a little bit more, so I'm just going to turn it up just a little bit. Let's get our tongs out, because now we don't have to get so messy with it all in here. Okay, we can start adding our first sets of batches. I did turn up my heat just a pinch, but we're still getting it good. And the trick is, you don't want to just dump this whole thing in there. You kind of want to do some batches of it. So we've got them. We're going to let them crisp up there, and then we'll wait. And when they're done, we're going to transfer them onto our baking sheet load with a paper towel so that it can like soak up any of the extra grease. Grab an extra cutting board out here.
Yeah, you have a question. Are you still making rabbit tonight?
My rabbit didn't come in time. It was originally supposed to be delivered Friday. Then it said Saturday. And then I got an update late last night that it wasn't going to be here till next week. So we're just doing lots of lamb lollies, which is a little sad. But that means I think not. It's supposed to get here on the 29th. So we'll probably do it for the Sunday dinner following it. And I didn't want to completely cancel the order because all the kids were excited to try rabbit. But I was a little bummed that it wasn't coming. Okay, while we're doing this, we are going to start and do our mushrooms for the base of our kind of a green bean casserole. Is you kind of put your blanched green beans in a cream of mushroom soup. So we're gonna make a little mock cream of mushroom soup. There we are. So I got my smaller little Dutch oven over here. A little bit, about a tablespoon to a tablespoon and a half of olive oil. And then I am going to turn on my burner. We're going to heat that up. I'm going to put in a big spoon of oil. And then I am going to turn on my burner. We're going to heat that up. I'm going to put in a big spoon of 4 to 5 cloves. And we're going to let that cook up just a little bit. Give it a nice stir. And there we go. While we're going to blanch our green beans real quick. So blanching, if you're not sure what that is, it's where you just cook them briefly in hot water. So it tenderizes them up a little bit, and then these will go in the oven and they will cook more. So we've got a big bag here. These are already the washed and snipped ones. So we're not using the whole bag tonight, just half of them. If they want to let them out. And we're going to let them boil for about 5 minutes, and then we'll take them out. And then I'm just going to reuse that hot water for our potatoes. So that's about half our bag. And while those are blanching and our onions are cooking, I'm going to slice up our mushrooms. These are baby bellas. I love baby portobello mushrooms. I think they're delicious, but you could also use white button mushrooms for this. I wouldn't waste the money to do any specialty mushrooms. These are going to get coated. They're going to be in a rich, creamy sauce. So they're in there, but they're not they're going to be masked. I like to spend the money on something where the mushroom is going to shine. But there's no need to waste it when it's going to be drenched in cream and stuff. Okay. Get these going. Beautiful. Just a few more. This is about, I want to say, a half a pound of mushrooms, so about 8 ounces. And again, you could buy pre-sliced if you wanted to. I just find that the whole mushrooms last longer. They don't go as yucky as quick. Let's give our garlic starting to crisp up nicely. So we're going to throw our mushrooms in. And we're going to have them start sauteing, let out their nice flavors here. I'm going to give them a good coat in this delicious kind of oil that is now infused with the garlic. And you can see when you blanch your green beans, they get an even more vibrant green color. That is what you want. That's like when they're they're tenderizing up. So they'll still be firm, but they'll be like a tender crisp. I don't know, that's the best way to do it. And now we have our onions. I'm going to give them a little stir now, kind of flip them over. Look at these getting a nice crispy golden color on it. There, perfect. Crisp these up just a little bit. You want to just wait until kind of they all get that nice golden color.
Do you have a question? When you get the rabbit, are you going to do a live for it?
Yes, I'll do a live for it. I'm very excited I'm deciding how exactly I'm going to cook it up, but I am very excited for it. I will say I haven't done rabbit in so long, so it'll be exciting. Because you know what? I first thought, I'm like, oh, I can get this from Whole Foods, because you used to always be able to buy it from Whole Foods, but they didn't have any. So then I had to go to like an online place to see if I could get it shipped in. And then they said that it would be due next day delivery. Well, that was not the case. But I'm still excited, to try it out. I always feel like, sometimes I'm not a big proponent of getting bougie ingredients, but it's fun to try every now and then. Get the kids excited. I always want them to try things, expand their palates. It's like my kids love lamb, and it's because we have it a couple, I think probably once or twice a month, and we just expose it to them so that they get used to some meats that have a bit more of a gamey flavor.
Venison and alligator.
Yes, I was gonna say we have had a lot. When we were in Florida, we had them try alligator. We've tried venison, and we've had them try a lot of different things. Just like to, my biggest goal is to try it. You don't have to love it, but if you just try a bite, you might be surprised that you like it. We did frog legs one time. I did not cook them up. We had them at a restaurant. That one, well, heebie-jeebies probably. They were delicious. There we go. Give these a nice stir. Just want to kind of get that garlic off the bottom. I'm going to put a little bit more oil in there. Mushrooms are like little sponges. They soak up everything, and I don't want any of it to stick to the bottom because we're going to be baking it in this dish. Okay. Look at these. I think our first round of onion straws are ready to come out. They look delicious. So I'm just using my tongs, and we're just taking them out, and we're putting them straight on the paper towels. Okay. And now we're going to put this next batch in. These are when I make this at Thanksgiving time. It's really hard to keep people away from them. They sit there and they eat all of the onion straws before I have a chance to cook them up. So I typically, when I do it for Thanksgiving, because I make a huge one, I've cut up about 10 onions. And I want to say like 3 of the onions are mainly for people snacking as they walk by. They steal an onion straw.
Question: what type of oil?
Olive oil. I just try everything of mine in olive oil. It's just a bit easier for me to just keep one big oil around. We're going to grab our green beans out of here. I am reusing this water for my potatoes. So there we go. And the green beans won't add any other flavor. They're in there for so little because they're just a quick blanch. And then we can start to add our potatoes in here for our mashed potatoes. And I was trying to decide how we were going to do our, what we were going to do for potatoes for dinner tonight. I was like, ooh, do we do twice baked potatoes? Or I was thinking about doing a potato au gratin or scalloped potatoes. But, there's just something about good old mashed potatoes. They're just so good. They're almost everyone's favorite except Evie. I told you Evie doesn't like potatoes at all, except salt and vinegar chips. She likes salt and vinegar chips, so I don't know if I consider that a potato. But that's really the only way she'll eat any type of potato. I don't know how you can not like potatoes. They're so delicious. Okay. Get these. I'm going to peel them, and then I'll just cube them up, and then they'll go in to start getting boiled for nice and soft. These are russets. I love russet potatoes for mashed potatoes because they're a bit more fluffy versus gold potatoes. Those have a bit, they're more waxy, so they're more of I want to say, a sticky potato, where these are more fluffy. Okay, one more potato. Again, we're feeding 9 tonight, so gotta make sure there's enough. I know when I found out that my rabbit wasn't gonna come, I was like, oh no, I don't have enough protein. So thank goodness, we live in near a big city, so Whole Foods still had delivery. So I put in an order last night, and they delivered, and so I picked up 2 more racks of lamb lollies. Otherwise, they were going to be some very sad people. But here I got these are my 4 racks of lamb lollies. What I'm going to do is I'm going to chop them into individual things so they look kind of like a lollipop. Why? Hence lamb lollies. And then we'll season them up, and you just saute them on your skillet. They cook up super fast, which is really nice. They're because they're not super thick. And I made them one year as just a thing because they are the more expensive cut of lamb. And I have been told I am never allowed to go back on Easter. They always have to be the lamb lollies. And they were the ones that like I normally would do a lamb roast. And then lamb chops are, I will say, and the ranking of lamb roast is on the bottom. And then lamb chops, good. And lamb lollies are like, that's where it's at. That's the good stuff. Let's give our mushrooms. We're getting a nice, good, beautiful browning on them. Let's check these, give them a good stir. Perfect. Say now that always I will say when you're frying up something, especially with a lot of drippings, your first batch will be your perfect one. Your second and third batch, you have a bit more of the little grains that have left behind. So they you'll get a little bit of darker spots in it, but it's never burnt. It's just they've, little droppings that have fallen in get cooked up a little bit more, but they still taste delicious. There we go. Let's make a little room. So I have my back burner. We're just going to start putting these in here as this warms up to cook. Get these potatoes chopped up. And then we're going to get our rolls in the oven. I had them proofing. We made, I will say, they're yeast rolls with sourdough discard. So our favorite rolls are sourdough rolls with a pinch of yeast. These are opposite, but these rolls, they were ones that I can get done in like an hour and a half versus my other rolls that I normally make are like a 5-6 hour roll because the sourdough needs time to activate. But these they're pretty good. They're delicious. For a yeast roll, they're really well. I do love sourdough a bit better, but I meant to start a sourdough loaf last night, but life got away from me. Here we go. So we got our potatoes in there. Let's get these.
Do you have a question? Do you have a recipe for your focaccia bread?
I don't know if I have a recipe card up there, but I do have the video. So if on the link on our page is where we upload all of our videos from our live streams, and those are going to be where you could rewatch it and make along with it. And so I don't know if I have a recipe card, but definitely the video is up there, so you could make along. There's a couple of different versions of focaccia that I have made depending on the time. So I have one that's a straight up sourdough focaccia, and then I have one that uses a little help from yeast as well. And they all take different amounts of time to make. Let's put these last batch in.
Yeah, a question. What are the fried onions for?
These are going to be for our green bean casserole. So when I make my green bean casserole, I make it from scratch. Everything is from scratch. So we're crisping up the onions. These are going to go in the green bean casserole as well as on top. Okay. We have got that going in there. Let me just clear these potato skins out of the way, free up some room. And then we're going to put our rolls in the oven. So I've got them proofing in this oven. But that one's my favorite oven over there. So look at these guys, these big old rolls. They look delicious. So these are my yeast rolls with some sourdough discard. So they'll be good things. And I'm going to pop these in my oven at 375 for about 20 to 25 minutes. So we're going to put them right up on top. Nice heated one. That's gorgeous. I'm going to set my timer. I'll do it for 22 minutes. And that way, if they need a little bit more, I'll know. But let's finish up with the rest of dinner.
Can you go over the recipe for those rolls?
Yes. So I prepped them earlier. What I started out with was 1.5 cups of warm milk. And then I added in a tablespoon of yeast and 2 tablespoons of sugar. You let that foam up. Then I added in 1/4 of a cup of melted butter with 1/2 cup of sourdough discard and a teaspoon of salt. and then you mix all of that together with the yeast mixture, and then you add in 4 cups of flour, and you knead it for about 7 minutes. That kneading is going to give you the elasticity you want. And then I proofed it for about an hour. Then we shaped it, and I proofed it again for about 30 to 35 minutes. And now where we just took them out. Okay, we've got our mushrooms here. They've got this nice brown caramelization on them, which is what we want. That's going to give us our delicious flavor. Okay, let's see if these guys need turning. We're getting lots of little more of the browning bits at the bottom. I'm going to turn my onion down, but as you can see, it gets kind of gritty with the flour at the bottom. So you have like the bits that have fallen in there. So when you do the last bit, you want to kind of just pick around those. Okay, let's see. Let me get my, we're going to make a little bit of a gravy with our mushrooms. And we're going to do, so it's like a cream of mushroom soup that then we'll add our onions in, and then we're going to add our green beans in. And we're going to start with a little bit of cream and a little bit of chicken broth and then some flour to thicken it up. So I don't ever really use chicken broth. I just use chicken bouillon and water. It's a great space saver, has a bit more flavor. Just had to get a new jar. There we go. Let me grab a spoon for that. And before we do, let's season up our mushrooms with a little bit of garlic salt. About a teaspoon, you don't need much. And some black pepper. I want to say like a half a teaspoon. This is also going to be in your gravy. And then we're going to put in a good spoonful of chicken bouillon. We're going to stir that up. I'm going to add just a little bit of water. And this is going to thicken up pretty quick. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to sprinkle a little bit of flour over the top of this. And this is going to make kind of a roux without doing a true roux. And you just try to make sure you sprinkle it like it's snowing. You know what I mean? You don't want to have any big clumps of flour fall down because then it might turn into a little dumpling. So just sprinkle. You're aiming for about, a tablespoon to 2 tablespoons, depending on how big your recipe is. So you see it's as if we had a nice snowy day, and we're going to just stir these in. There we go. And this is going to create kind of the thick base for our cream of mushroom soup in here. And I'm going to add a little bit more water. We got some in our things. There we go. And then we're going to add some cream until I get it to the nice, right, thick consistency. You want it nice and thick because you don't want your green beans to be, or your casserole to be soupy. Let's see. Okay, our onions are good over here. So what I'm going to do is we're going to pick out the onions that are nice and not the bits that have fallen down. You should be able to grab those because, you don't want to let any onions go to waste. These things are delicious. But there's just really, I guess if you were to do them in like a fry daddy and you had a basket, they could all fall around, but no need to buy special equipment when you can do it here. Okay, I've got this off. And then what I'm going to do is just we're going to use that pan in a little bit, so I want it to just sit and clean. Okay, now let's put it over here. You guys have a better view, and we can get this one on a higher temperature. There we go. Okay, so we're making our little gravy for our cream of mushroom. We're going to add a little bit more broth. We're going to use about, 1 to 2 cups of water and some heavy cream. If you don't have heavy cream, you could use half and half. Just use a little less water and a little bit more because you just want it to have a nice creamy flavor to it. So we're going to start with about a half a cup. And again, I'm just eyeballing it, but there we go. So now we're getting this nice, rich, and creamy flavor for our cream of mushroom soup, which is going to be the base for our green bean casserole, which we'll be having with our lamb lollies, mashed potatoes, our sourdough roll, or our yeast rolls with sourdough discard in there, and then our caramelized carrots and onions. So we kind of just have this delicious, delicious feast. I know we did earlier today. I made cinnamon rolls, lemon rolls, and orange rolls as our brunch. I'm gonna turn my heat down and we're gonna taste this, see how it delicious. Okay. We've got it nice and thick. I'm gonna turn it down to a low simmer. And then here is our blanched green beans. We are going to throw those right in here. We're gonna give them a nice stir. We're gonna coat them with this whole cream of mushroom kind of soup base that we did for our green bean casserole. And then we are going to stir in half of our onions into the mix, and then the rest is going to be a nice crunchy layer on top. Okay, so we're going to start with the ones that we're stirring in. And I will say, it's so delicious. It also helps thicken it up. But I will tell you, this is everyone's favorite side dish at Thanksgiving. So we've got them stirred in. So we have our mushrooms, our blanched green beans, and we made that kind of cream of mushroom base. And then what we're just going to do, I'm going to turn off my heat. We blot everything down. And then we're going to take these remaining onions and you're just going to layer them on top with this nice, thick, kind of crunchy layer. They're going to be delicious. And so you see how this is not your grandmother's green bean casserole recipe. This is definitely a more bougie one, more upscale one, but the flavors are amazing. And if you didn't think you liked green beans before, this recipe is where it's at. Okay, so we have our nice crunchy layer on there. And this is our base for our green bean casserole. And what we're going to do is we'll pop this in the oven in a few minutes, and it just needs to cook up for about 10 minutes more. But we're just going to slide it off to the side for now. We got our potatoes here. I'm going to see if I can steal out some of this water, just so it doesn't boil over. When you pre-fill it, you never know exactly how much water displacement you're going to have. There we go. Perfect. Take off some of that starchy water on the top. There. Okay. Now let's get our meat prepped. We're going to season it up. Like I said, these lamb lollies, they don't take long to cook up. So we're just going to go through and you're just going to cut each individual. See, it's like a little lollipop. And I'm just going to cut them through. We'll season them with some rub sage, garlic salt, pepper, and Worcestershire sauce. And then what you do is you just sear them off on the pan. But because it's such a thinner cut of meat, it cooks through pretty fast. So it's like 2 to 3 minutes on each side, and then it's done. You don't want to overcook these guys. It's just like a steak. But they are delicious. And they are a family hit here. So we got our first set. So half of these were from Costco because we were originally going to do them with rabbit, and the other half are from Whole Foods because there's very few grocery stores that are open here on Easter Sunday, like right around here. But luckily, being just outside of Nashville, you have some benefits there. Otherwise, I was like, well, maybe we'll have some leftover ham from last night. And you don't even need a cleaver to cut through these. They're they're like individual ribs. So you're just really cutting through the meat out there. You could roast these in the oven, but I find pan frying them gives them the most flavor. There we go. And if you've never had lamb before, it is slightly more gamey than steak, like than beef, but it is mild compared to some of the other game out there that you can eat. So it is, I think it's a good introduction for like trying new meats. I will say, I think lamb is better than bison. Bison is a bit tough. It's a very lean meat, and so it definitely is hard to cook up where it stays tender and juicy. Versus, I think lamb has so much good flavor to it.
You have a question. How many are you feeding tonight?
We are feeding 9 tonight, and I will say, like Teddy and Jack, my little ones, will probably eat one of these. Evie eats 2 to 3. And then my son, Torn, will eat 4. My husband will eat 4. They're not very big. So this all together, with the bones included, is about 5 pounds. So that means when you take away the bones, you probably are left with around, 3 pounds of meat. So it's going to be about a third pound of meat per person, less for the little ones. But I will say they're expensive and they don't go very far. Typically, when you get them served at a restaurant, they'll give you 3 lollies as a serving. So, but they are the best cut of lamb. This one definitely has a little bone through it. Let me get my cleaver out. These are this last rack here, the last 2 racks are the whole food ones. So here, cut it through and I can see it. I will say the cleaver always does such a great job cutting. There we go. And you're just essentially, just like with ribs, you're cutting right down between the bones. There we go. This one does not want to cut. Its bones are very close at the bottom. There we go. And tedious. What we're going to do is we are going to season these with rub sage. I find that sage really complements the more gamey flavor of lamb in a really nice way. I will say sage is probably one of my favorite seasonings to do with lamb. Okay, this one, we're just going to cut the bone off because there's not much of a lolly on it. There we go.
You have a question. How regularly do you have to sharpen your knife?
My cleaver, not as often because I don't use it all the time. But my regular knives, I do it about every 2 to 3 weeks. It's when I notice they're getting dull, like if they start to slip and slide. My hand's a quick wash. But I will tell you, I am not the best person who cares for their knives as well. I put mine in the dishwasher, which is a no-no, but it just makes it easier for me. Now, I've also had my knives for like 16, 17 years now. I got them as a wedding present. So they have been with me for a long time. Okay, let's get this guy in the oven. And then we're going to season our meat. He's going to be hot, so I'm going to get my an oven mitt because he's heavy. I will say Dutch ovens are heavy. We're going to have him pop it in here. We'll pop it right next to our rolls. We can take a sneak peek. They've just got a little bit longer on them. But look how beautiful they are. I'm going to rotate them.
You have a question. Where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Iowa. I lived in Iowa until I was 10. Then I moved to Nashville. Then I moved back to Iowa for undergrad. And then I moved back to Nashville for grad school. And we've just lived outside of Nashville now since I moved back in 2009. But those are kind of my 2 places. When we moved away when I was 10, I thought Iowa was the greatest place ever. And I couldn't wait to go back. Then I went back from college and I realized how cold it was there. And it was not, it was not meant, I I had lost my ability to handle that cold weather.
You have a question. Where in Iowa?
Ames, Iowa. So I was born and raised in Ames, Iowa till 10, and I went back there to Iowa State for my undergrad. And I will say it was so cold there. It was so cold I finished up my undergrad in 3 years because I just couldn't handle the cold anymore. I've lost it. I'm a baby. I can't. It was just too cold, and it happened to be the 3 coldest consecutive years that Iowa had in a long time. It was so cold that Iowa State canceled classes, and it was like the first time they had canceled classes because they never did then. And it was like negative 25 degrees. My car wouldn't start because it was too cold. And I just decided I was done with the cold. It's fun to visit. So I visit my sister there a lot, but not for me anymore.
You got a question. What are your degrees in?
So I have a lot of degrees. So my undergrad, I have one in early childhood education and one in special education. So I did 2 degrees. And then my master's is in early childhood special education, and my doctorate is in educational leadership and policy. So did a lot of schooling, had a lot there. But I loved it. I was gonna say, I love school and learning. And when I found out I was pregnant with my 4th one, I decided to step away from my job because I was kind of tired of the rat race at the time, and I wanted to, be at home. So I've been at home for the last 4 years, and I have been loving it. I had been working beforehand, and I'm so glad that I took my time off from it. I think it's kind of crazy because I spent all that time getting all these degrees, but you can't beat the time you have with your kids. And they were growing up so fast, and I was constantly having to make decisions between whether I could do school events or, you know what I mean? Because you could only get so much time away from your job that I just needed a break because I needed to connect back with my family. So that's kind of why I stepped away, and I've been home for a little while, and I have been loving it. So for my lamb, I have coated everything in some Worcestershire sauce, garlic, salt, pepper, and rubbed sage. And then we're going to flip everything over, and then we're going to recoat the other side.
People are pointing out, but you're still teaching.
Yes, I am still teaching. I will say, I don't think you can get away from it. I think if you have a teaching heart, you're just always doing it, and I love it. You know, I just felt like at the time, because I had a really unique situation where I was working both with young children and with like grad students, college, masters and doctorate students. I kind of was a supervisor and did both. So I got to work with both age groups, which was very rewarding. But it just became so demanding, and I needed a break. I had already given so many years because I will say, I graduated college early. I was just like a person who just did everything really quick. I had this plan in my life. And then, it was like, I had 3 kids, and we thought we were done. And then we found out we were, pregnant with Teddy. And I just was like, you know what? I want to stay home for a little while. I never had that chance to do it with my other 3. And then we had Teddy, and then Jack came along, and now I'm like, oh, I don't know if I could go back and do it right now. I need to wait till at least Jack gets back into school, especially with just how demanding school is nowadays for kids, how much, homework they have for the parents. I always say every project they come home, they're like, oh, looks like I'm doing another project here, because if I don't help out, we're going to be the one person who doesn't have the Pinterest project that their parent didn't do for them. So, it's rewarding. And I will say it has also allowed me to be there for my kids' sports, which is kind of hard. I will say once you get into the world of youth sports and you realize how much it dictates of your life, it's like my kids wouldn't be able to do it if I was back at work, because it just wouldn't be able to work well with our schedules. Okay, let me wash my hands here. We're getting our onions caramelized up. We'll check on our potatoes, and then we're going to start sauteing these.
You have a question? Have you always loved cooking?
Yes, I have always loved cooking. I started cooking when I was 13 years old, and I took over for the family. Before that, we had like a nanny slash chef because my parents were in the field of academia and they were busy, and so we had somebody who cooked for us. And then we'd all decided that we were gonna take turns cooking, and it started out with one of my siblings. We'd cook one night a week, and then, my mom did the weekends and stuff like that. And then I slowly just took over it all because it was the best paying out of the chores. And I really enjoyed it. And because my parents were also in academia, they held dinner parties all the time. And I was really fortunate to be able to watch all of these chefs who would come in and cook all these delicious meals for them and learn from them. And they were always really nice. And I learned a lot of different things from them that really just fostered my interest. Plus, my parents were really great at getting me all the cool cooking stuff and just, experimenting with things and new ingredients. And, I really loved it. And I think it's probably like my grandfather really loved cooking too. And he used to just really always would cook for us too and make these amazing meals. And I always thought it was just awesome. Let's go grab our rolls out. We're going to check on our green bean casserole there. We're getting close to the very kind of end. We're going to saute up. Gorgeous. Should put my gloves on right. These are our beautiful rolls. Here. Look at these nice golden brown and perfect. These were our rolls, our yeast rolls made with some sourdough discard. So not a true yeast roll, but absolutely delicious. Let me go turn off this timer here. It's going to beep incessantly. Okay, let me check these potatoes and then we can start sauteing up our chops, our lamb lollies. We're going to see how these are going. Oh, perfect. So I can put these to the side and we can start heating up. I always say I need a bigger stove, but it is really hard to find an electric stove that is more than 30 inches. It's only commercial after a while. Okay, let's put a little bit of olive oil in here. We're gonna let that warm up, and then we're just gonna start sauteing off our lamb lollies. And then I'm gonna got my onions caramelizing over here for our carrots. We're gonna start tossing these in here. And we're gonna caramelize them up, cook them, and with that a little bit of brown sugar towards the end so they have a nice sweet flavor. There we go. We've got a few more. I always love to get the fun, colorful carrots. So apparently, carrots didn't used to naturally be orange. I think it was like Dutch farmers back in like the 1700s. They used to have the purple and the white carrots, and they ended up crossbreeding them to create the orange, and they became the most popular one that they've stuck now, and we rarely see the purple and the white carrots because they're not as good. And it's just crazy to think like they knew how to do that in like the 1700s. Here we go. We're going to slice this through here. We've got a couple more of these, and then we're going to whip up our mashed potatoes and our lamb lollies. And, okay. We're going to slice these tips off right here. And then we're going to throw these into our pan, and we're going to cook them up nicely with some little things. Okay, let me start putting in our lamb. Our oil is nice and hot, and we're going to add them in here. There we go. And you just don't want to crowd them with our things. So we're going to start off We're going to start cooking these nicely.
You have a question? What do you think about the new stainless steel cutting boards that people use?
I'm not a big, I've never used one, but I think the concept of them isn't very good because just cutting a metal knife against a metal cutting board just won't. I feel like you're going to slide really easy on it. You're going to dull your knife out. Yes, you're going to be able to sterilize it, but I don't think it's going to be. It's not. I don't think. I looked at them and I was just like, not going to do it. Not going to get it. We're going to drain our potatoes here and we're going to whip these up into a nice mashed potato. Let me grab my lid and here we go. Make sure you wear pot holders when you do it. Otherwise, you are going to steam yourself out. So we're going to, here we go. Drain all of them out. Okay. We've got our water out and then we're going to put in a stick of butter. We're going to let that melt down in here. Here we go. There. And you want to put it on there and we're going to, before we whip it up, we're going to let that butter melt for just a second. And let me, where's my, did I put my other tongs over there? Here we go. We'll just use these. I'm going to caramelize. We're going to toss up our carrots. Then we're going to add, I'm going to put a lid over this to help steam them up a little bit faster. Here we go. There we go. Got my big one. These.
You have a question? Did you add any salt to the potatoes as they boil?
I will add the salt in at the very end when I add cream and whatnot. Okay, we're gonna give these a nice flip over. And then our first batch of lamb lollies will be done. Okay, we got those steaming up here. Let me grab my brown sugar real quick for our carrots. And, okay. I'm just gonna move this right over here because I'm gonna grab my trivet and we are going to whip up our mashed potatoes. So we've got that sitting there. Let me grab my cream and I got my salt and my hand mixer. Now for the mashed potatoes, I'm whipping mine up in my pot because it is stainless steel. If you have a pot that has a non-stick coating on it, do not do this. You will completely destroy your pot. So I'm doing it in a non-stick or my stainless steel, not a non-stick. So we've got that. We're gonna add a bit of cream. And then we're gonna add our salt now. And then we're gonna whip it up and I'm gonna see how it is if I'm gonna add any more. My salt doesn't want to open. Where? You know when you get a new salt and you can't break that? There we go. You're gonna start with about 1.5 teaspoons of salt and then we'll whip up a little bit more into it if we need it. Here we go. Now that we put that stick of butter into it, so it should be nice and melted. Room temperature butter is also really, really good for this. Here we go. And I'm going to add a bit more cream because you can see it's still kind of dry and I want a nice smooth one. And then we're going to grab our first set of lollies off because they are ready. So before I whip that, let me grab a secondary tray. And I will say these cook up really quick. So it's the nice beauty of them. And so you see this nice golden brown kind of searing we're getting on them. It's perfect. There. And let's put our next batch in. We'll cook there, and then we'll finish up our caramelized carrots and onions. We'll whip up this, and then I'll be able to show you guys how we're going to eat it. That way you don't necessarily have to watch me cook up all of these lamb lollies.
Have you ever made sweet rolls before?
Like the meat sweet rolls, or the like the bread, like sweet rolls. So I made the bread, but I have not cooked up like, I guess they're called like sweet meats, or the meat part. But rolls, I do. Yes, we actually made some sweet rolls earlier. I guess we made hot cross buns, which are kind of the Easter bread. The Italian Easter bread we made earlier this week is a sweet roll bread. We're gonna whip this up, and here we're gonna get it nice and creamy. There. So our mashed potatoes are done. We've got these steaming up nicely. I put the lid on it because it helps the carrots tenderize up. So we're gonna give them a nice toss. And then we're gonna put a little bit of brown sugar in them. We're gonna let that kind of caramelize, and then a little bit of garlic salt. So it's that sweet and savory. So we're gonna do about a half a cup of brown sugar for all of these carrots. You don't need to go more than that. You don't need it super sweet. Just enough to kind of give a nice little glaze on your carrots. Okay. You can see they're getting tender. They're starting to move one. I like my carrots to be slightly firm but soft, if you know what I mean, where you've got like a tender bite through but still a little crunch with them. Okay. Let's go grab still a little crunch with them. Okay. Let's go grab our, and I should be able to serve up our first plate, show you guys how we are making it. So here we've got our green bean casserole in here. You can see the green beans are bubbling. You just bake it for about 20 minutes after you cook it so that all the flavors can really meld together. So I've got that right there. And this is our delicious with our homemade crispy onions on there. Let's see. I'm going to put a little bit of garlic salt in our carrots, and then they are just about done. There. Okay, let's do these. We'll flip these, and then I'm going to serve up a plate and show you guys how we're going to be eating them today. You see they've got a nice little golden brown crispy kind of sear on them. Again, they cook up very fast, so you don't want to overcook them. They just need about 2 to 3 minutes on each side. There we go. And now I'm going to grab a plate, and I'm going to show you guys how we're going to serve up our dinner, because we're just now waiting on the last of our things. Okay. We have our mashed potatoes. Let me get my little shovel for our green bean casserole. And that delicious kind of creamy mushroom gravy that we made. Got a little bit more of those mushrooms. I'll put on our caramelized carrots and onions with a little bit of brown sugar. And then, of course, let's not forget our lamb lollies. And look at this beautiful yeast roll with some sourdough discard. Again, for dinner tonight, we are having our lamb lollies that we cooked with sage, garlic salt, black pepper, mashed potatoes, homemade green bean casserole, our caramelized carrots and onions, and a sourdough yeast roll for our Easter dinner tonight. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, show you what we're cooking, what we're feeding our family. Again, all of our videos can be found on the link on our page. We upload them about an hour or two after they're done. Thanks again. Don't forget to like and subscribe.